magic is found in every room where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah, and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset, and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello, and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Luke Freeman.
I'm Hannah Bratterud.
And I'm Chris Province. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
Awesome. Good to see you. I'm excited to, dig into another one of our Unlocking EQ episodes. Today, we're going to talk about resilience. So much to unpack. One little word and I guess a lifetime of discovery. So I look forward to exploring this idea with you all. Before we get started, let's get our question of the day. And I guess we're going to play our version of Would You Rather. And I'm going to ask you guys, would you rather work for a leader that was a great visionary storyteller or work for a leader that was really likable?
That's a good question. There's a fallacy in your question, though. Is like surely you can have
I know,
both.
but in this scenario, you can't.
Oh, I see.
So I know there's a lot of visionary storytellers that are highly likable, but I'm just saying, would you rather is a forced decision, and it's to find out more about you.
Well, we've already found out that I like to argue with the rules of the game. So success. Okay, so I can go. I'm going to make some assumptions, and my assumptions are that if the person's really likable, that they're also open to feedback and that I can move into some sort of role where I can help provide some vision. And if that's the case, like I really need likable people and people who have who are very relational to partner with me for me to be successful. I do pretty well providing kind of the vision piece. And so if I'm with a leader that really is okay with that and okay with having that complementary skill set, that can work really well. Whereas on the other hand, especially if they're not likable and they have a vision, like I'll probably disagree with it. And then we'll just fight about whose vision should win. And I get that they're my boss, but I'll probably still fight with them.
Are you saying also, Luke, that you're just not very likable?
Well, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
What I heard is he only likes people he can manipulate for his own benefit.
That's what I heard.
That might be part of why my likability scores are kind of low.
Well, my initial response, of course, was also, well, can't I have both? But since I can't, I'm going to pick the visionary storyteller because I want to see where we're going. If you can show me where we're going, I will get there. And especially if you are the kind of leader that will allow me to find my way and figure out how to get there. If you're going to dictate and tell me every step of the way how I do it, I kind of lose interest. But if I can see the picture of this is where we're going, and so when I hear the word likable, I also think of someone who's really nice. And I've worked with leaders that are very nice and very terrible leaders. And so I think if you're always trying to be nice and always trying to please, and I say that from a little bit of a people-pleasing perspective, because I tend to do that to some extent. But if you're trying really hard, you can be a bully and still be really nice. You can be really nice and bully the people around you because you're not setting clear expectations. You are, and so when it comes down to it, I've worked for leaders that were polite and nice and did not set clear expectations and then would come down on their people at the 11th hour with just a lot of a lot of grief because people hadn't filled the expectation that was never clearly set because the leader was too worried about being nice. And so, yes, show me the vision, tell me the story, get my imagination involved, take me along on an adventure, and I will go every step of the way with you.
Right. That's a great tie-in. And when I first started thinking about the question, um, I'm going to answer it differently than what I thought I would, and I'm going to go with I want the visionary storytelling. I want to embrace the power of positive potential, and I want to be inspired. And I value being bold versus being liked. And I think that shows up as a true part of me. I try to be likable. I put my values forward, but it's about being bold with what I believe. And hopefully I attract other people that believe what I believe, and we can hang out and have beers and talk about all the good stuff, right? But, it's such an interesting question, Hannah. You hit on how it fuels resilience. When I see that story, when I understand what's possible, I am energized. I can be rejuvenated. I can, connect with the people around me at work. But the reason I picked this question, of course, is because the most successful firms, they have likable leaders because they're more visible than ever, right? We're on social media. We're doing a podcast. We're out there. If you're going to lead a firm, you're more public than what you've ever been as someone that's a business leader. But then also, to put your ding in the universe, you've got to have a bold vision. So and bringing it full circle, when we think about our brands, it's really about blending being likable and casting a really bold vision. And not only just casting that vision, but showing progress towards it. And sometimes that progress, it's not always the most likable approach internally. Because if you're going to cast something that big, sometimes you have to direct effort. We can't all hold hands and have Skittles, right? We've got to do work, and sometimes direction is part of that. And that's where, I continually be enamored by this. Let's disagree and commit, right? We've got to go forward. And that's that technique of, if we have a bold vision and we have to show progress, maybe we don't have time to hold hands and cull out the people that don't agree and get the team just right. We got to go. Maybe that's where direction becomes part of leadership. So thank you guys for jumping in on that with me. So let's dig into what we're talking about today. It's in our EQ series. If we're going to be self-aware, there's so much about that. We become self-aware in different situations, and being able to make it through different challenges, stare different situations down, and come out the other side, maybe not just surviving that, but thriving through it, becoming a little bit better. But let's start with framing this up. As you guys understand it, what is resilience?
To me, resilience is the time that it takes you to recover from a setback. It's the ability to keep going or get back up, however many times it takes. There's this, and I may have talked about this before, but when I was doing a lot of indoor cycling as part of kind of my training routine, I learned about active recovery and what it means. The shorter the time that you can regain your heart rate, kind of stabilize your heart rate and your breathing after a big push, the better your aerobic fitness is. And so I think of resilience a little bit in those terms. When we do a big push or we face a big challenge or a big setback, Like, how well are we able to bounce back, to normalize, to get back our equilibrium and continue to keep going? And in that, I think there's something to do with energy management too, right? Because resilience isn't just pushing and pushing and pushing. And the more I learn about physical training and recovery and what it takes to build endurance physically, you can't just keep pushing and not sleep and not eat right and not, you know, do the things that help your body recover. So when you are performing at a very high level that demands a lot of your focus and attention and strength and stamina and all the things, um, part of that is also being very aware of what it takes to restore and rejuvenate your energy so you can continue to show up at that level.
Luke, yeah, what is it to you?
Yeah. If I was going to boil down what is resilience, this might be a little philosophical, but I think it's hope. People who have hope continue to move forward no matter what today looks like. If today's a hard day, if there's roadblocks in the way, if a relationship that with a stakeholder isn't working out, if you have hope, you're going to keep moving forward and being resilient. And so what does that take? It takes someone who understands where they're going. We talked about vision at the beginning of this, but has a clear picture of what success looks like. And also, we've talked about growth mindset a lot, and someone who understands that challenge is a part of the journey. And it's not so much that we choose an easy path or a hard path. It's that life is about choosing what type of hard path do I want to take? Do I want to take a hard path where I'm having real conversations about disagreements in real time with people, and it's uncomfortable and it's messy, but we move forward together after having conflict? Or do I want to take the hard path where I avoid kind of that short-term pain, but then the project suffers or it boils over, a month into trying to move forward with someone, alongside someone? So I don't know. To me, that's resilience, hope, and then also the mindset that challenge is normal and is good. And that doesn't mean all challenge is good. I'm not trying to say, hey, being in poverty is good or whatever. I'm just saying, like, some level of challenge is really a normal and healthy part of human existence.
Yeah, that's good. To me, I love what you touched on there about that confidence of knowing where you're going. I think those commitments matter a lot in making us resilient. Resilience to me is just, I'd sum it up as the ability to build character or strength through times of discomfort. We talk a lot about, great leaders are comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think there's an element of, at some point we learn that when we try to avoid all the suffering, we sometimes end up creating more suffering. And yeah, I've lived that truth enough to know that's true. And, it's just, it sucks sometimes, but we got to stare it down and we got to lean in, even when we know it's going to suck. And Luke, if you don't mind, maybe talk to me for a moment about what the role of mastery and grit, and maybe how that plays into our ability to be resilient.
Everyone has a need for mastery kind of built into us. And what that means is that we want to progress. And Does that show up for everyone? No. We all know kind of the quintessential, or whatever the word is, like the stories about people who don't progress, or about, not too bad for government work or whatever. And this like lowered expectation of work product and what it needs to look like and what the expectations are and what it means to be a functioning adult, and that there's a plateau that we can get to and stay there. But what science shows us is that people who plateau because the systems that they're in reinforce plateauing. It's not because of them. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, but the psychological rule is that we want to progress, we want to grow. And so for folks who are resilient, they've tapped into that innate drive and embraced it and had the grit to say that, okay, even if a system is trying to plateau me, I am going to be gritty enough to actually do system change so I can continue progressing.
Yeah, and kind of ache into that. It's not accepting that condition and believing in that positive potential. And then also, the more we lean into discomfort, the more comfortable it gets. And I think of somehow, once you find success leaning into discomfort, it's almost like you want to do it, because that's the win. Because you realize, like, it's not a popular behavior, it's a differentiating behavior. So if you lean in one time, I think there's some implementation intent, right? Like, don't look at this thing as this big obstacle, but break it down one step at a time. Open the box, unpack the box, get the directions, put these two pieces together, and sooner or later I have a beautiful piece of IKEA furniture, direct from Norway.
Actually from Sweden, but
I know. I just like to flip-flop those two countries for you, Hannah.
Thank you.
So, but yeah, it's like the more we lean into discomfort, the more we find success by doing that. Then that grit informs our mastery around being able to do it. On, we become more resilient.
Earlier I said resilience was about hope. Like, what I hear you talking about right now is faith, right? Faith that if I lean in to hard things, that good things will result. And I might not see the result today, I might not see it next week, but I have faith that when I lean into hard things, I'm differentiating myself from the status quo, and that good things are going to happen. Do they always happen? No. But I have faith that it's worth the struggle, worth the journey, and I know where I'm going.
Yeah. And I think with that, to Chris's point, the more we do it and we begin to see the evidence of it working, because if we're always leaning into discomfort and it never works out, then at some point we're just going to stop, right? But again, there's so many analogies for me from running here. The more I run hills, which is really, really uncomfortable for me. Like, in the beginning, just running period was uncomfortable, but running hills is like my battle. And it's like the thing that I keep leaning into. It's very uncomfortable, but the more I do it, the more I get comfortable with that discomfort. And the more I see the benefits of doing that, right? Because I get faster, I get stronger, I build more endurance, I get more resilience from leaning into that discomfort of pushing myself to climb the hills that, aerobically just sometimes make me want to just puke or stop or lay down and like not move, but you keep pushing into it. And yeah, you might be sore, you might be fatigued, you might need some recovery time, but then the next time you do it, you realize, hey, I got this. Like, I can do this. I can do more of this. And it's actually what helps me build resilience.
And to prove that, how just effort averse we're wired to be, like how less likely is it that I notice the effect of not running the hills? It's when you go to the race, you get the benefit of running the hills. But if you go to the race not having prepared that way, and then you experience it, you're not very likely to take the inventory and go, man, I should have ran those hills.
True.
It's crazy how we're wired that way but if a leader or if a person experiences enough pain from not leaning in, they'll start to lean in. But they have to have sometimes a relationship, a friend, a leader, a colleague, someone within their community can maybe look at it and say, by trying to avoid all this stuff, you're creating chaos. And the route to order is by leaning in one time. So, I don't know, just some thoughts. That's good. Good philosophical stuff. I mean, let's take it down to brass tacks, though, Hannah. What are some benefits of being able to be resilient? How do resilient people benefit?
Yeah, I think I started to touch on it earlier when I talked about storing energy. So I think if you are a resilient person, you have the ability to store energy that you can invest in creativity and forward thinking, that you can invest in people and innovation, in doing new things, right? When we're just going through the motion and we don't have a lot of resilience, we're just surviving, and all we can focus on is like what's right in front of us right now. We're fighting fires, doing whatever. But if we have the ability to regain and restore and store up energy, that we can have reserves for those extra steps, and we've talked about in some other episodes, the difference between good and great, it's not that much. It's the ability to take that extra inch, be 1% better, like do the extra push. And so when you can, so I think that's one of the benefits. As we build more resilience, we have a greater capacity for storing energy for the things that differentiate us.
That's powerful. Luke, what's kind of your key benefit of being resilient?
I really think it's impact for me. I mean, that's a purpose-driven question, I guess. Like, I want to have an impact on the world. And if I'm not resilient, my impact is dramatically diminished. So, like, that's the key benefit, is we get to make a difference. We get to make this place a little bit better than we found it. And if we're not resilient, like, it doesn't hurt anything necessarily. Like, there's a lot of folks that they're probably relatively happy, maybe even in some ways, and take care of themselves and have their routine. But that doesn't align with my purpose and my values. And I want to have a wider impact. I want to help as many people as I can with the days that I'm given. And if I'm not resilient, like, how am I supposed to do that? Because this world can be a hard place. And when I think about this last year, what would my impact have looked like if I hadn't been resilient? And not, I'm not saying I'm a pinnacle of resilience. I'm just saying, like, continuing to try, continuing to learn, continuing to adjust, experiment, like, we would be in a different place as far as impact goes. And I think people's lives probably would be maybe just a tiny bit less rich. Folks, at least, that I've been able to hopefully invest in and contribute to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, it is so much tied to well-being, like being resilient and being well are, they're bound. There are things that are more together. And just the idea that if I want to have influence within my communities, then I have to be resilient because that's who people want to follow. It's not always who's the most likable. It's not always who's the best storyteller. A lot of times it's about who's the most resilient. And that's what allows leaders to emerge. And that's why EQ is so important for leaders. Like being self-aware to say, I know this is going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to lean in anyway and not allow the default wiring to take over and say, this is going to be painful, run away. And that's so much about EQ is kind of battling that default wiring. Like the way we should behave and the way we want to behave are two different things. And, that I guess thinking about it, it's that saying the hardest thing to do and the right thing to do are usually the same thing. I think, it's the EQ, that's the USA Today version of saying like, be self-aware and intervene when necessary.
Yeah, but like, isn't just the act of reflecting and being intentional about your own emotional intelligence, like that's an act of resilience? Because like we dredge up some muck anytime we reflect. At least I do. I'll just speak for myself. But like, what was my motivation there? Why am I feeling the way I am today? What was limiting my performance during that meeting? Whatever it is, when I start reflecting on that, like things that there's a reason I wasn't thinking about them, right? I was protecting myself from those thoughts or those feelings or whatever. And so just in facing those, I'm practicing resilience and moving forward and overcoming some sort of status quo limiting factor, limiting belief about the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly like reflection as a tactic to build that resilience is huge. Luke, thanks for sharing that. Hannah, kind of what's your go-to tactic? Like when you have the need to build resilience or be resilient in a moment, like what do you do?
Yeah, for me, it's just what we've been talking about. It is recognizing when I'm trying to avoid the discomfort, avoid the pain, avoid the emotion that, and then so having the awareness to recognize, okay, I'm avoiding this now because I think it's going to feel a certain way, right? And it's emotion that drives all of our behavior and also what we don't do, right? Because the brain will try its best to get us to avoid anything that's going to feel painful in some way, right? And that's a survival mechanism. That is part of what makes us resilient as humans, why we're able to survive really well. We have good threat detectors. Our brains are good threat detectors. So part of that mechanism is we're going to avoid anything that feels uncomfortable or painful in some way, right? So gaining the awareness of when we're doing that, if it's not a real danger, right? And often the fear of the thing is worse than the thing itself, right? So I'm not always great at doing that because I'm someone who tend to be pretty fearless when it comes to a lot of things that many people are afraid of. Yet there are things that like scare the crap out of me, but it's not like this fear that I'm really aware of, right? It's this underlying fear of some sort of emotional fallout that makes me avoid certain behaviors or certain tasks or certain things. And so it has to start for me with getting aware of, like, if I'm avoiding or procrastinating, what is the fear? What's driving that fear? And why am I afraid of it? And then often even just getting that awareness can help you be like, okay, it's really not that big a deal. I'm just going to go do the thing. And lean into the discomfort, right? But starting again with becoming aware of when you're avoiding pain or discomfort out of fear.
No, and I think when I'm engaged, like in maybe in a coaching situation, or and definitely in my own life too, when I'm challenged, when I feel fatigued, overly emotional, like what are the things I have to go to? And sleep, nutrition, movement, exercise, white space, meditation, praying, reading a Bible, like getting a kind of out of the world and like just focusing on how do I rejuvenate. And I think it's the best way I can say it is like, yes, we have the physical nutrition in that piece, but it's also the mental nutrition. Like so much, like if you are anxious, grab a bite to eat, but also if like it will help you, like you got to understand like how does your physiology and your mental health tie together. And we're learning more and more about that every day. But just the same way, like you wouldn't load your body on nothing but carbs for a week, like you should not consume only news for a week, right? There's like keeping your mind, like your mental nutrition. That's the best word I can think of for it. It's like, what are you putting in your mind and what are you putting in your body? Because both of those things are going to affect how we show up. And then being aware about how we show up. That's the other piece. Like I'm only rejuvenating because I'm aware of how I show up. So you see how all these factors really spin up on themselves. And it's all triggered by being self-aware. Where am I at? What's my mental state? How am I showing up? How does my body feel? What challenges am I facing? Why did I behave that way? Again, this really healthy leadership behavior. And I think resilience is really a key to influence. As we talk about persuasion, resilient people can persuade. When people fold like a chair, nobody wants to follow you.
Well, and that brings to mind, we haven't really talked about like real-time resilience. But if we're going to collaborate with people, if we're going to have conflict with folks, if we're going to persuade people of an idea, if we're going to vision cast, storytell, whatever, like there's real-time resilience as we do that. It doesn't matter if it's on a Zoom call or if it's live in a room. When you're getting that real-time feedback from an audience, without resilience, you stick to the script. And you don't actually create the most value that you could create. With resilience, you're willing to take what's coming from that audience or that person you're having conflict with or whatever, and adjust and create opportunity out of whatever's happening real time in the moment.
And so I want to, before we break out of here today, I want to issue a challenge to both of you guys, and I'll take it with you, and then let's come back offline and share the outcomes. But sometime over this weekend, let's ask somebody that we care about or are connected with about us. Maybe they'll share a story when they were most resilient. And, think about when you were most resilient. And how does that show up with you today? And let's come back and talk about that offline. It's something I'd love to learn more about each of you, and then what you learned through that exercise of sharing those moments with someone else that you care about.
I like that. Great challenge. Challenge accepted.
All right. So before we break out, last thoughts on resilience.
Man, I didn't know how meta resilience was going to be today. So I'm just grateful for Chris, the opportunity, and Hannah to listen to your thoughts on it, and then also to reflect and just say, wow, this is around hope and faith and purpose. And like those really for me are my takeaways. Like my resiliency depends on those things and on the willingness to embrace conflict and challenge and bumps in the road as they come. And so, yeah, that's my takeaway, and maybe feel a little bit more resilient coming out of our session here than coming in.
Yeah, for me, it's gratitude for just working with two very resilient individuals and leaders who lead by example and show what it means to be resilient. And I've had to draw on a lot of resilience in my life, and I think the two of you have as well. And I think as we work together in creating a resilient organization, we can set that example and help to lead the leaders that we work with and help other organizations become more resilient as well.
Yeah, Hannah, I really love that idea of like it really is resilient leaders that build resilient teams and resilient organizations. And I'll take something from Dave Smith Sr. Luke, the first day we met him, he comes in and he says, tough times never last, but tough people do. And I'll be forever grateful for him to sharing that pointed wisdom with me, because it's true. What he's saying is like resilience perseveres and it transcends. And, you just have to keep doing your thing, but it requires high levels of commitment. And that's my takeaway. Like if we are highly committed and we're explicit about what we're committed to and what we assign value to, man, resilience is natural. Resilience is natural when we are being authentic. Resilience is difficult when we are not. And that's my parting shot for today. So thank you all so much for the time. For you guys listening, if you guys want to tackle resilience as a topic with your team, you've liked any of our Unlocking EQ episodes and feel like, hey, that relates to the work we do, or I've got a team that I'd like to really emerge as leaders. That's the work we do. It's the work we love to do. And these are the topics we care about most. So thank you all for listening. Until next time on Magic in the Room, we'll see you later. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Luke.